The Galactic Advanced Veterinary Institute towered over the bustling medical district of New Genesis Station, its prismatic walls refracting starlight in mesmerizing patterns. I, Dr. Praxanex, stood at my office window, watching the morning traffic of hover ambulances ferrying various exotic creatures from across the galaxy. My four upper appendages unconsciously adjusted the perfectly aligned instruments on my desk, while my lower ones remained crossed in contemplation. Dr. Nex, the voice of my assistant, Trill, buzzed through the intercom. Your 9 a.m. consultation with the Jovian gas-dwelling spore cluster is here. Thank you, Trill, I responded, my vocal membranes vibrating with practiced professional courtesy. Please ensure the atmospheric chamber is set to exactly 89.7% hydrogen, 10.2% helium, and 0.1% trace elements. We don't want another incident like last week. I shuddered, remembering the unfortunate expansion of a gas-dwelling patient who had nearly filled an entire treatment room due to improper atmospheric calibration. The cleanup had taken 3 days and cost me a fortune in specialized equipment. Making my way through the pristine corridors, I nodded to my fellow practitioners. Dr. Mira Voss, our resident expert in silicon-based life forms, was carefully polishing her crystalline exoskeleton while reviewing patient charts. Dr. Blep, fourth spawn of the Hive Collective, was leading a group of medical students, their synchronized movements suggesting they were sharing knowledge through their telepathic network. The Institute represented the pinnacle of xenobiological healthcare in the galaxy. Our protocols were meticulously designed, tested, and implemented. Every treatment was backed by at least 3 peer-reviewed studies and approved by the Galactic Medical Board. We took pride in our perfect success rate, achieved through careful screening of cases and strict adherence to established procedures. As I approached the consultation room, I quickly reviewed the patient's file on my neural interface. The spore cluster showed signs of decreased luminosity in its third quadrant, a textbook case requiring standard treatment protocol 447B. Simple, efficient, predictable. Good morning, I announced as I entered the perfectly calibrated chamber. I am Dr. Praxanex, Chief Xenobiologist, and... The emergency alert cut through my standard greeting like a plasma scalpel through tissue. Red warning lights pulsed along the corridors, and Trill's usually composed voice crackled with urgency over the intercom. Dr. Nex. Emergency in Bay 4. Unknown Earth species critical condition. The handler is demanding immediate treatment. I felt my chromatophores pulse with annoyance. Earth species were notoriously unpredictable, their biology a chaotic mess of evolutionary shortcuts and redundant systems. This was definitely not going to be a standard protocol day. I rushed to Bay 4, my appendages automatically grabbing a diagnostic scanner. The doors slid open to reveal barely contained chaos. A massive creature lay sprawled across the examination platform, its gray and white fur matted with blood-red blood. How primitively obvious. It had to be at least twice the size of a standard Earth wolf, with cybernetic augmentations visible along its spine and legs. Someone get this thing out of here. Dr. Mira Voss backed away, her crystalline form reflecting the emergency lights in agitated patterns. We don't treat unregistered hybrid species. A human female stood beside the creature, her hands pressed against a wound in its side. Please, she begged, her voice cracking. Shadow got hurt protecting our colony from a razorback attack. He's bleeding out. Listen, human. Dr. Blep, fourth spawn, chittered nervously, their collective consciousness causing all their appendages to wave in synchronized distress. This facility follows strict protocols. Your pet appears to be some kind of illegal genetic experiment. We could lose our licenses. I stepped forward, scanning the creature. The readings made my inner membranes constrict with confusion. The baseline genetic structure was clearly Canis lupus, but there were modifications, enhancements, and something else. Something that didn't match any known Earth species. It's not illegal, the human snapped. Shadow is a certified colony guardian, a dire wolf hybrid engineered to protect frontier settlements. He's registered with the Terran Frontier Authority. The creature Shadow let out a whimper that somehow managed to sound both pained and annoyed. His eyes, one natural and one with a targeting interface, fixed on me with unsettling intelligence. Fascinating, I muttered, my scientific curiosity temporarily overriding my distaste for irregular cases. The cybernetic integration is remarkably sophisticated for Earth tech. Are you going to help him, or just stand there taking notes? The human's voice carried that particular tone that humans used when they were about to do something extremely irrational. He's dying. Dr. Voss's crystalline form chimed with alarm. The liability issues alone and our equipment isn't calibrated for Earth predators, let alone genetically modified ones. I watched as Shadow's vital signs began to fluctuate wildly on my scanner. The wound was clearly caused by a razorback's toxic spine's nasty weapons that released an anticoagulant compound. For most species, we had standardized treatments, carefully tested antidotes. But this creature's hybrid nature meant those treatments could kill him faster than the toxin. I've already called Dr. Ashley Barrett, the human said, pulling out a communications device. She's the veterinarian who helps maintain Shadow's cybernetics. She can be here in 10 minutes. A human veterinarian? In our facility, Dr. Blep Fourth Spawn's collective horror sent ripples through the local psychic field. Their medical practices are practically barbaric. They still use manual surgical techniques. Shadow growled, the sound surprisingly articulate for a creature bleeding out on an examination table. The cybernetic eye focused on Dr. Blep, causing the hive-mind physician to retreat further. I found myself at a crossroads. Every protocol, every regulation, and every ounce of professional training told me to reject this case. But something in the way the creature tracked our movements, in the fierce determination of his human companion, it disrupted my neat, orderly view of proper medical practice. The scanner beeped again. Shadow's vital signs were deteriorating rapidly. 10 minutes, I said, surprising myself. But if your Dr. Barrett isn't here by then, we do this my way. The human's relief was palpable. She'll be here. Just help me keep pressure on the wound until then. And that's how I, Dr. Praxanex, chief xenobiologist of the most prestigious veterinary institute in the galaxy, found myself applying primitive pressure bandages to an illegally fascinating Earth creature, while waiting for a human doctor who probably still used steel scalpels. Dr. Ashley Barrett arrived like a whirlwind in a white coat, carrying what appeared to be an ancient leather medical bag. Her red hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she wore scratch safety goggles pushed up on her forehead. She looked nothing like the pristine medical professionals who staffed our facility. Status report, she barked, already pulling on examination gloves. Not sterile nanofilm gloves, but actual physical barriers made of synthetic material. How quaint. Multiple razorback spine punctures, I reported, trying to maintain professional composure. The toxin is preventing coagulation, and his hybrid nature makes standard treatments contraindicated. Thanks, she barely glanced at our advanced diagnostic displays, instead placing her hands on Shadow's body and feeling along his sides. Shadow, buddy, I need you to let me know where it hurts the most. To my astonishment, the creature lifted its cybernetic legs slightly, indicating a particular spot. Dr. Barrett nodded as if this was perfectly normal behavior. His neural interface is still working then. Good boy, Shadow. She reached into her bag and began pulling out equipment that belonged in a medical history museum. Metal scissors, gauze pads, glass bottles of liquid. You cannot be serious, Dr. Voss chimed in horror. Those are physical instruments. We have nanosurgical units, cellular regenerators, which aren't calibrated for his unique biology. Dr. Barrett cut her off. Shadow's hybrid nature means his cellular structure rejects most automated healing processes. We learned that the hard way. Now, are you going to help or just stand there critiquing my methods? I found myself oddly amused by hearing my own medical speak turned back on me. What do you need? First, we need to neutralize the razorback toxin. She pulled out a vial of murky liquid. This is an antidote I developed after the third time one of my patients tangled with those spiny bastards. It's specifically designed for enhanced canines. You developed it yourself. My secondary hearts nearly stopped. Without proper trials? Without Galactic Medical Board approval? Dr. Barrett actually laughed while preparing an injection. Welcome to frontier medicine, doctor. Out there, we don't have time for 10 years of trials. We adapt, we observe, we adjust. Shadow here has helped me test and refine treatments for dozens of enhanced animals. The dire wolf hybrid made a sound that was surprisingly close to a proud bark, then winced. Easy, big guy, Dr. Barrett soothed. Dr. Nex, I need you to monitor his vitals while I administer the antidote. His cybernetics sometimes go into overdrive trying to compensate for injuries. I moved to the diagnostic panel, noting with surprise that she knew my name. You seem well informed about our facility. Had to be. Knew someday one of my patients would end up here. She worked as she talked, her movements precise despite the primitive tools. Frontier settlements are pushing further out, which means more injuries, more emergencies. Your facility is the only major medical center in this sector. My chromatophores betrayed my interest by shifting to a scholarly purple. The combination of biological enhancement and cybernetic integration in your patient is unprecedented. How do you maintain homeostasis between the organic and synthetic systems? That's actually a funny story, Dr. Barrett grinned, while suturing the wound with what looked like spider silk. Had to rewrite half the standard cybernetic protocols. Turns out enhanced canines process synthetic materials differently than standard earth dogs. Shadow here was my first success case. The dire wolf's tail thumped weakly against the examination table. Stop encouraging her, you oversized puppy, Dr. Barrett scolded fondly. You're supposed to be dying dramatically. I watched in fascination as she worked. Her methods were unorthodox, even primitive by our standards, but there was an undeniable efficiency to them. She anticipated problems before they appeared on our monitors, adjusted treatments based on subtle changes in Shadow's breathing or muscle tension. The neural interface is reporting increased pain in the lower quadrant, I noted, watching the readings. Yeah, I can see it in his whiskers, Dr. Barrett replied absently. Shadow always twitches the left side when he's hiding pain there. Trying to be brave for the new doctors, aren't you, tough guy? Dr. Voss had edged closer, her crystalline form vibrating with reluctant interest. You can read physiological cues without scanning equipment. Have to. Half our frontier settlements can't afford major medical tech. We learned to work with what we have. Dr. Barrett's hands never stopped moving as she spoke. Every enhanced animal has their own tells. Shadow here is actually pretty expressive for a dire wolf hybrid. Should have seen the enhanced bear I treated last month. That was a challenge. Enhanced bear, Dr. Blep fourth spawn's collective consciousness rippled with alarm. Oh yeah. Frontier settlers are getting creative with their guardian animals. Bears, wolves, even some big cats. All enhanced for intelligence, strength, and loyalty. All needing specialized medical care. She looked up at us with a grin. You folks might want to start updating your databases. I found myself taking notes, both fascinated and horrified. These practices cannot possibly be sustainable. The risk factors alone. Tell that to the colonies these animals protect, Dr. Barrett interrupted. Shadow here has saved more lives than I can count, worth every gray hair he's given me in return. Speaking of which, she turned to the diagnostic panel. How's his blood chemistry looking? I checked the readings, surprised to see them stabilizing. The toxin appears to be neutralizing. Coagulation is returning to normal parameters. His cybernetic systems are rebalancing. Good boy, Dr. Barrett praised, and both Shadow and his human companion visibly relaxed. The antidote includes nanites programmed to help his systems sync back up. Took forever to get the programming right, but it works like a charm now. You programmed medical nanites to interface with cybernetic systems. My voice rose several octaves. That's brilliant, suggested Dr. Barrett. Insanely dangerous, I corrected. Fascinating, but dangerous. Welcome to Earth Medicine, she winked. Now, who's going to help me close up these wounds properly? I've got some really interesting synthetic tissue adhesive I've been wanting to test. To my eternal surprise, I found my upper appendages already reaching for the offered supplies. Somewhere between the horror and fascination, my scientific curiosity had won out. Besides, I had to admit her results were undeniable, even if her methods made me want to hide behind the nearest sterilization field. I suppose I said with all the dignity I could muster, this could be considered a learning opportunity. Shadow's cybernetic eye winked at me. I chose to believe it was a malfunction rather than deliberate communication. Anything else would mean admitting that Earth medicine might be more sophisticated than we'd thought, just in a completely different direction than we'd expected. Just as we thought we had the situation under control, Shadow's cybernetic systems began flashing red. The dire wolf's organic eye rolled back, while the mechanical one started rapid scanning the room in erratic patterns. "Cascade failure, Dr. Barrett," and I said simultaneously. She looked at me with surprise, and I felt my chromatophores flush with professional pride. "His enhanced healing factor is fighting with the cybernetics," I explained, reading the diagnostic displays. "The synthetic systems are interpreting the accelerated tissue repair as damage and attempting to shut it down, which will trigger his defensive protocols," Dr. Barrett finished. "If that happens, his combat augmentations will activate. Anyone not recognized as friendly will be considered a threat." Dr. Voss's crystalline form chimed in alarm. "Combat augmentations? What kind of veterinary patient has combat augmentations?" Shadow's massive body began to twitch, metal components whirring ominously. His human companion stepped forward, but Dr. Barrett held up a hand. "Stay back. His friend or foe systems are scrambled. He won't recognize anyone right now." "We need to shut down his cybernetics," I said, reaching for our emergency override equipment. "No," Dr. Barrett caught my appendage. "His organic systems are too dependent on the synthetic support right now. A complete shutdown could kill him." "Then what do you suggest? Because I calculate approximately 3 minutes before those augmentations fully activate, and I do not wish to discover exactly what combat capabilities they include." Shadow's body jerked violently, claws extending with a metallic shing. The examination table groaned under the stress. "We need to synchronize his systems manually," Dr. Barrett said, pulling more equipment from her seemingly bottomless medical bag. "I can interface with his cybernetics directly, but I need your help to monitor and stabilize his organic functions." "That's not protocol," I protested weakly, even as I moved to assist her. "Neither is having your medical bay torn apart by a confused cyber wolf," she pointed out. "I need your tentacles and your knowledge of xenobiology. His enhanced genetics aren't purely Earth-based anymore." I examined the readings more closely and felt my secondary heart stutter. "Is that Venusian apex predator DNA? How is that even possible?" Later, Dr. Barrett promised, already connecting cables between her diagnostic tablet and Shadow's neural ports. "Right now, I need you to help me balance his hormone levels while I reprogram his cybernetic responses. His enhanced metabolism is flooding his system with adrenaline equivalents I can't even pronounce." Working together was like trying to choreograph a dance where each partner was following completely different music. Dr. Barrett's movements were quick, intuitive, based on visual cues and hands-on contact. My own work was precise, measured, guided by exact readings and established parameters. "Blood pressure spiking," I reported, administering a carefully calculated dose of stabilizers. "The enhanced healing factor is accelerating beyond safe levels." "His pain suppression protocols are fighting your sedatives," Dr. Barrett muttered, fingers flying over her tablet. "Shadow, buddy, I know it hurts, but you need to let the medicine work." The dire wolf snarled, a sound that was half organic growl, half mechanical whine. His cybernetic leg kicked out, nearly taking off Dr. Blepp Fourth Spawn's head. Perhaps Dr. Blepp suggested from their new position behind a medical cabinet, we should consider evacuation protocols. "No one's evacuating," Dr. Barrett said firmly. "Dr. Nex, I need you to synchronize your stabilizer administration with my system resets. We have to get his organic and synthetic healing to cooperate instead of compete." "That would require perfect timing," I protested. "The margin for error is huge," she agreed, "which is why I'm glad I have 4 of your tentacles to help. On my mark, I'm going to initiate a soft reset of his combat systems. The moment they come back online, you need to hit him with the stabilizers. His organic system will be briefly undefended and more receptive." I felt my chromatophores shift to a nervous orange. "And if our timing is off, then we'll probably find out exactly what those combat augmentations can do." She gave me a grin that humans probably found reassuring but just made my anxiety spike. "Ready?" No, I was not ready. This went against every protocol, every safety measure, every careful procedure I'd built my career upon. But Shadow's readings were getting worse, and I could see the genuine concern behind Dr. Barrett's confident demeanor. "Ready," I said, positioning my appendages over the various control interfaces. 3, 2, 1 mark. The next few moments were chaos. Shadow's cybernetic systems went dark, his organic eye snapping open in panic. My appendages moved in perfect synchronization, delivering precisely measured doses of stabilizing compounds. Dr. Barrett's fingers danced across her interfaces, rewriting protocols on the fly. For one terrifying second, nothing happened. Shadow's readings flatlined across all monitors. Then his systems surged back online. The dire wolf's body arched off the table, organic and mechanical parts glowing with activation energy. Dr. Barrett never flinched, continuing to type commands. I maintained steady pressure on the delivery systems, watching in fascination as the readings began to align. His neural patterns are synchronizing, I reported, amazed. The organic and synthetic systems are adapting to each other. That's it, Shadow Dr. Barrett encouraged. Remember your training. Integrate and adapt. The dire wolf's breathing steadied. His cybernetic eyes stopped its frantic scanning and focused, matching the calm gaze of his organic one. The combat protocols quieted, weapon systems powering down with a soft whir. Well, Dr. Barrett said, wiping sweat from her forehead, that was exciting. Exciting, I let all my appendages drop in exhaustion. That was terrifying. Brilliant, but terrifying. You manually reprogrammed combat cybernetics while they were active. Had to, she shrugged. Standard procedures wouldn't work with his unique biology. Sometimes you have to improvise. Improvise, Dr. Voss had emerged from her protective corner. You rewrote fundamental protocols governing the interaction between organic and synthetic systems, while under threat of imminent dismemberment. Actually, Dr. Barrett said, checking Shadow's vital signs with both her tablet and her hands, we rewrote those protocols. Your understanding of xenobiological responses was crucial. I couldn't have stabilized his organic systems without your help. I felt my chromatophores shift to a pleased purple before I could stop them. The synchronization between mechanical and biological healing factors is remarkable. The potential applications for other hybrid patients. See, Dr. Barrett grinned. Frontier medicine isn't so primitive after all, just differently advanced. Shadow chose that moment to lift his head and give Dr. Barrett's face a long, wet lick with his very non-cybernetic tongue. Shadow, she wiped her face with her sleeve. What have I told you about professional behavior in medical facilities? The dire wolf's tail thumped against the table, and his cybernetic eye definitely winked this time. There was no way that was a malfunction. Your patient, I noted dryly, appears to have a rather informal approach to medical protocols. Welcome to Earth medicine, Dr. Barrett laughed, where the protocols are made up and the professional distance doesn't matter. Looking at Shadow's readings now showing perfect synchronization between systems that should never have worked together, I had to admit that perhaps some protocols were meant to be broken, or at least creatively reinterpreted. The recovery ward of the Galactic Advanced Veterinary Institute had never been quite so lively. Shadow had been moved to our largest observation room, which was now crowded with an unusual mix of medical professionals. Dr. Barrett sat cross-legged on the floor beside her patient, while I hovered nearby, monitoring readings that continued to defy conventional medical logic. His hybrid systems have achieved perfect homeostasis, I reported, still somewhat amazed. The organic and synthetic healing mechanisms are actually cooperating now, instead of competing. Sometimes systems just need a reminder that they're on the same team, Dr. Barrett said, scratching behind Shadow's ears. The dire wolf's tail created rhythmic thumping sounds against the floor, which made Dr. Voss's crystalline form vibrate in sympathetic resonance. Fascinating, Dr. Voss chimed. The emotional connection appears to be accelerating his healing response. That's not in any of our protocols, Dr. Blepforth's spawn observed from a safe distance. They had developed a healthy respect for Shadow's range of movement. Maybe your protocols need updating, Shadow's human companion suggested. She had introduced herself as Ranger Kate Palmer of the Frontier Colonial Service. Earth medicine has always understood the connection between emotional well-being and physical healing. I found myself nodding. The synchronization we achieved during the surgery, it wasn't just about technical precision. Dr. Barrett's rapport with her patient was a crucial factor. "Don't go spreading that around," Dr. Barrett grinned. "People might start thinking Earth medicine is actually sophisticated." The technical skill required to modify cybernetic protocols during active combat readiness suggests a significant level of sophistication, I pointed out, even if your methods are somewhat unconventional. Shadow's cybernetic eye whirred in what I was beginning to recognize as amusement. The dire wolf had shown more personality in the past few hours than many sentient patients I'd treated over the years. "Director Mindaro wants to speak with both of you," Trill buzzed through the intercom. "Something about unprecedented protocol violations and revolutionary medical breakthroughs." Dr. Barrett raised an eyebrow. "Should I be worried?" Actually, I felt my chromatophores shift to a thoughtful blue. "I believe I have a suggestion that might interest all parties." The director's office was designed to impress, with walls displaying thousands of medical certifications and awards. Director Mindaro herself was a towering figure of the Arcturian species, with bioluminescent patterns that indicated both authority and curiosity. "Let me be clear," she began, her patterns pulsing with careful deliberation. "You performed unauthorized treatment on an unregistered hybrid species, using non-standard medical procedures, while risking a combat-enhanced patient losing control in our facility." "Yes, Dr. Barrett," and I said simultaneously. "And in doing so, you may have revolutionized our understanding of biosynthetic medical integration." The director's patterns shifted to show interest. "Dr. Nex, your preliminary report suggests applications far beyond veterinary medicine. The principles we discovered could be applied to any case involving organic and synthetic system integration," I confirmed. Dr. Barrett's techniques, combined with our advanced monitoring capabilities, created something entirely new. "Which brings me to my proposal," I continued, feeling unusually confident. "The frontier colonies are clearly developing medical needs that our current protocols don't address, but they're also developing solutions we never considered." Director Mindaro's patterns showed she was already following my logic. "You're suggesting a partnership." "An exchange program," Dr. Barrett cut in, catching my drift. "Your facility has resources and research capabilities we can only dream of on the frontier. We have practical experience with cases you've never encountered." "Think about it," I added, warming to the topic. "A formal exchange of knowledge. Your medical professionals could learn frontier medicine techniques, while Earth doctors could access our advanced facilities. We could develop new protocols that combine the best of both approaches." "The liability issues alone," Director Mindaro began. A low growl interrupted her. We turned to see Shadow standing in the doorway, Ranger Palmer beside him. The dire wolf's cybernetic eye was steadily recording everything. "With respect, Director," Ranger Palmer said, "liability issues won't matter much when more frontier settlements push into dangerous territory. We need medical care that can handle whatever the galaxy throws at us. Today proved that working together is more effective than either side working alone." Shadow punctuated her statement with a dignified bark. His cybernetic leg made a distinct tapping sound on the floor. "Did that enhanced dire wolf just try to vote?" Director Mindaro asked faintly. "Welcome to frontier medicine," Dr. Barrett laughed, "where even the patients have opinions about their care." I watched the director's patterns shift through various emotions before settling on a combination of resignation and excitement. "I suppose," she said carefully, "we could establish a pilot program. Under careful supervision, of course." Of course, I agreed, while Dr. Barrett tried to hide her smile. But the director held up a warning appendage. "We need proper documentation. Standard procedures. We can't have frontier doctors running around performing miracle surgeries without any paperwork." "Already done," Dr. Barrett pulled out her tablet. "I recorded everything we did today, with full notes on the integration procedures we developed, though you might want your xenobiologist to help with the technical terminology. I just called some things whooshy bits and flashy parts." I felt my chromatophores flutter between embarrassment and amusement. I can assist with the translation into proper medical terminology. Then it settled. Director Mindaro's patterns showed finality. The Galactic Advanced Veterinary Institute will establish the first official cross-species medical exchange program. May we all survive the paperwork. Later, watching Dr. Barrett prepare Shadow for discharge, I reflected on how much had changed in one day. My perfectly ordered world of medical protocols and procedures had been thoroughly disrupted, and somehow I wasn't bothered by it anymore. "You know," Dr. Barrett said, as if reading my thoughts, mixing things up isn't always bad. Sometimes the best discoveries happen when we let go of how things are supposed to work. Shadow pressed his head against my lower appendages, nearly knocking me over. His organic eye showed clear intelligence, while his cybernetic one recorded yet another memory. "Yes," I said, automatically reaching down to pat his head. I'm beginning to understand that. I paused, considering my next words carefully, though I still think some of your methods are completely insane. Says the doctor who helped me reprogram combat cybernetics by basically playing musical chairs with neural protocols, she grinned. That was a carefully calculated risk. Sure it was, she winked. See you next week for the first exchange session. I looked at Shadow, who was now shamelessly begging for attention from Dr. Voss. The crystalline doctor had given up on maintaining professional distance and was using her resonance field to create pleasant vibrations for him to enjoy. Next week, I agreed. Bring more of those impossible cases of yours. But please, I added with what I hoped was obvious sarcasm, try to make sure they don't have quite so many teeth. Shadow's tail wagged, his cybernetic eye winked, and I knew my ordered medical world would never be quite the same again. Somehow, that seemed like exactly what our facility needed.